When we're looking at insulin resistance, we know that the blood sugar is going to be higher because the cells are not responding to the insulin and processing that glucose correctly. One problem with that is that calcium likes to follow sugar. So if sugar is high in the bloodstream, calcium is going to leave the tissues and other places where it's supposed to be and go and follow that sugar. So we get to where calcium is displaced. And calcium is one of the most alkaline substances on the planet, so that has the ability to push the pH of that blood to a more alkaline side because it's so filled with this alkaline calcium. So we know that when the blood is leaning too alkaline, that's a problem. Oxygen can't get down to the tissues. But another thing we want to look at is let's look at this study here on modulation of pressure pain thresholds during and following isometric contraction in patients with fibromyalgia. And this study suggested that the patients with fibromyalgia, their muscles have a harder time relaxing and they stay more in that contracted state, which can really elevate pain sensitivity. And this paper on cramps listed fibromyalgia as one of the most common comorbidities that's affecting patients and their quality of life, is that these muscle cramp type situations keep coming up. So what we understand is that calcium is one of the most important tissues that allows those muscles to relax. And when too much calcium is pulled out of the tissues, that's when we see those muscle cramps. So this makes sense that, well, the calcium is being pulled out of the tissues because of the high sugar levels, and then those tissues become more contracted, more tight, with a lot more increased pain sensitivity that could happen before the cramp would show up, and then eventually if it gets severe enough, then we see the cramp. So if a person is having like Charlie horse type cramps with this fibromyalgia thing, that can be a really big clue. That doesn't mean everybody's going to experience these cramps, but it helps us understand what could be going on if everything is in this like contracted state, so to speak. And another thing that we see with a lot of type 2 diabetics and people that are leaning insulin resistant is that their breath rate is very low because CO2 is a byproduct of processing carbohydrates correctly. But somebody who's insulin resistant is not processing those carbohydrates correctly, so they're not creating that CO2, and the blood starts to lean more on that alkaline side, and then we get these oxygen utilization issues that causes the need for this fermentation that's going to create more lactic acid. So if this is part of the problem for you, then lowering blood sugar would be a really big deal.